Hello everyone, welcome to the second case study on how to export a Cloud SQL database to cloud storage using a user account. As discussed in the previous case study, in order to export a Cloud SQL database to cloud storage, the Cloud SQL instance service account or the user must have one of the following set of roles. That is, either a combination of Cloud SQL editor role and storage object admin role, or create a custom role which includes the following permissions, that is instances.get, instances.export, buckets.create, and objects.create, and assign these permissions to the service account or the user account as a custom role. The instances.get and instances.export permissions are already part of Cloud SQL editor role and Cloud SQL viewer role, whereas buckets.create and objects.create permissions are part of storage object admin role. Now, if you are the project owner, there is no need to explicitly assign these roles to the project owner because by default, project owner will have full access. But if we are using a separate user account to export the Cloud SQL database to the cloud storage, then these roles should be explicitly granted to the service account or to the user account. The Cloud SQL editor role or the instances.get and instance.export permissions should be assigned to the user account so that the user can access the Cloud SQL instances and get the relevant data. Whereas the buckets.create and objects.create permissions or storage object admin role must be granted to the Cloud SQL instance service account so that this service account can write the export dump into the storage bucket. Now let us see how we can achieve this in the lab. Here I have logged into the Cloud Console using my organizational administrator account, that is help desk. If I click on IAM and admin, click on IAM, then I could see that help desk has the organizational administrator role and also the owner role. I have also created another user account, that is GCP versus, and has granted Cloud SQL editor role only. And we will be using this user account, that is GCP versus, to export Cloud SQL instance to cloud storage bucket. Now the first criteria to successfully export is the user account should have the Cloud SQL editor role, which we have already granted. And the second criteria is that the service account of the Cloud SQL instance should have storage object admin role. Now let us verify whether the storage object admin role has been granted to the service account of the Cloud SQL instance. In order to validate that, let us go to the Cloud SQL instance, click on SQL, click on the instance ID. It will land you to the overview page. If you scroll down, you can see the service account over here. So this is the service account P123. Now we will validate whether this service account has been granted the storage object admin role for the cloud storage bucket. Click on the navigation menu, click on cloud storage, buckets. This is the bucket name that I'm going to use, that is versus. Click on the permissions. If you scroll down, we could see that the service account is not granted the storage object admin role, and hence the service account may not be able to export the Cloud SQL instance to this cloud storage bucket. But if we export from the Cloud Console, the Cloud Console will grant the service account the right access to the cloud storage bucket. So manually granting storage object admin to the Cloud SQL instance service account under this bucket is not needed. But if we export from the Cloud Shell, we have to explicitly grant storage object admin role to the service account of the Cloud SQL instance. So in this current state, we have only created GCP versus user account and granted Cloud SQL editor role. Now let us try to export the Cloud SQL instance using the GCP versus user account. For that, let me go to the GCP versus account. I am on the GCP versus account page. If I click on IAM, I will not be able to view any permissions because this user account GCP versus is not granted the get IAM policy. But I can view the Cloud SQL instance. If I click on Cloud SQL, click on the instance, click on the export. Now I can export in SQL dump or in CSV. I have selected SQL dump. I will select only one database. So I have created test123 database under this Cloud SQL instance. Click on OK. Now, since this user account is not granted storage admin role, this user account will not be able to view any buckets. So I have to go back to my organizational administrator account and explicitly grant storage admin role to this user account, and then come back and validate whether this user account is able to view the buckets. I'll click on cancel. Let me go back to the organizational administrator account. I will edit the user account to add storage admin role. Click on add another role. Click on cloud storage. Now I'm able to view the cloud storage bucket. I will select the bucket name. You can give any random file name here. Click on select. Now there is an information here. When we export, a service account will be granted write access to the selected bucket, which will be reflected in your permissions. So this means that at this point the service account is not explicitly granted the write permissions to this cloud storage bucket. But when we export using the cloud console, service account is granted write access to the selected bucket. Click on export. You can see in this information bar the export is in progress. The export is completed successfully. So this is how you export a Cloud SQL instance to the cloud storage bucket using a user account. The user account should have the Cloud SQL editor role, that is GCP versus, which is the user account, should have the Cloud SQL editor role. And secondly, the service account should have the right permissions into the storage bucket. That is, under this bucket, for the permission section, there should be a service account which should have storage object admin role and storage legacy bucket reader. These two roles are automatically granted when we export for the first time using the cloud console. Now let me remove the write permission for this service account for this cloud storage bucket. Click on edit, remove both the permissions, click on save. Now we see that the service account of the Cloud SQL instance is not granted the right permissions under this bucket. Now let us try to export the Cloud SQL instance using the Cloud Shell. Let me go to the user account, click on the Cloud Shell. Let me run the export command. This is the command that I will be running: gcloud SQL export. SQL test is the Cloud SQL instance name. GS versus is the bucket name. This is the export dump file name, and which database I am going to export, that is test1234. If I press enter, click on authorize, the export will fail. This is because when we run the export using the cloud console, the service account is automatically granted the storage object admin role. But when we run the export using the cloud shell, the service account is not granted the right permissions into the storage bucket. In order to fix this error, let me manually add the right permissions to the service account for the bucket. For that, let me go to the organizational administrator account. Next, let me get the Cloud SQL instance service account name. Click on the instance name, copy the service account name, go to cloud storage bucket, click on buckets, click on the bucket name, click on permission. Here I will grant the service account the read write permissions under this bucket. Click on grant access, type in the service account name, select the role will be storage object admin role. Storage object admin role contains storage.objects.create and storage.buckets.create permissions. And that is the reason why this service account can successfully write inside the cloud storage bucket. Click on Save. You can see the service account is now granted the read-write permissions under this bucket. Let me go back to my user account, that is GCP versus. Let me rerun the export command. You can see the export is running now and it should finish soon. The export is completed. So this is how you export a Cloud SQL instance to a cloud storage bucket using a user account, both using the Cloud Console and as well as the Cloud Shell. Thank you for watching.